Welcome everybody. My name is Pam Turner, and my presentation is called ELLs and the School's Shifting Role in Family Engagement. All right, so just starting off a little bit about myself. Like our previous presenter, this is my first time doing anything like this, so it is going to make me feel better to picture you as 6-year-olds. I spent 3 years, starting in 2020, working on my PDC EAL certificate. But just to back up a little bit more, I went to school in Regina. I was a French immersion student. I went through the back program. I did decide to keep going with my French studies, so did my teaching degree in French. So learning another language has always been a big part of my life. And then well into my career, I did decide to pursue a program or a certificate in the PDC EAL program. So I am currently teaching grade 1 to 8 core French in Regina. This has been my role for the past several years. I am hoping to make the switch to EAL specialist in the near future, but for now, French is what I'm doing. I really enjoy my students. I enjoy teaching another language. I do understand that EAL is a whole different ballgame, but I do feel like there are parallels in the two worlds, and I've loved seeing the connections. So, like I said, very nervous. I am sure in the next little bit that will go away, but I also wish I had taken an extra ADHD pill this afternoon, but here I am and we'll be good. Um, so to start off, I'm going to read a recount by Valentina Gonzalez, an American EAL consultant, teacher, and author. While she may not be a Canadian educator, she was an immigrant child herself, and she shares a passion for education, EAL families, and she works really hard to advocate for her students. Her story shares an interesting perspective as she recalls her own as well as her family's experiences with school. So please listen as I share her story out loud and be prepared to share the challenges faced by her family, herself, and any thoughts or feelings that may strike you as interesting or impactful. All right. Reflecting back on my own years in elementary school, I bet my parents may have seemed like they were not very involved with my education. We were new immigrants, and they spoke very little English. Adding to that, the cultural norms for school interaction were different where we came from. It may have seemed to my teachers that my parents were absent from my education. In fact, they were extremely present at home, but maybe not the way that my teachers expected them to be, not in the traditional sense. My parents didn't come to parent teacher conferences. That would have been a challenge. My dad worked every minute of overtime that he possibly could just to keep a roof over our heads. We had one vehicle, so that meant my mom was at home without transportation. And even if she could come to the school, she had my baby sister to care for. And my mom's English speaking skills were the least developed. But even with these challenges, my parents did support my education. They did what they could at home to enforce the importance of education. After all, we came to America for a better future. We came here so that my brother and I could have a great education and better lives than we would have had back home. My parents worked hard to instill values of education in us. They enforced homework, they told us bedtime stories, and they made sure that we understood that our teachers were the keepers of the knowledge. Go to school, listen and learn, be good, they would tell us. Essentially, this meant don't talk and do what the teacher tells you to do. When I became a teacher myself, I began to see students like my former self and families like mine come to school. I realized that these families need something different than the emails or newsletters we sent home. Those things weren't reaching them. I recognized that the traditional parent-teacher conferences and phone calls just weren't cutting it, much like they didn't for my own family. When we take the time to connect with ELL families, we need to send them the message that we care, we want to support them, and that they are valued. Research shows that when parents are involved in their children's education, their attendance is better, they do better in school, and they achieve a higher rate of success in post secondary education. So, this is the part where we were supposed to log in and then type in our thoughts and feelings, and a little speech bubble thing or word cloud would have popped up. Unfortunately, it's not working. Just off the top of your head, was there anything that stood out from her story? Just any words, challenges, anything that stood out? Thank you. Yeah, 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 for sure. Anything else? That's it. Anyone else? Okay, we'll leave it at that. All good. I would have shared a similar thought. What jumped out to me were cultural norms, being present at home, and then the word connect. I feel like that's really important. So, Valentina's personal reflection is a good starting point, as her perspective perhaps sheds some light on many of the reasons our own EAL parents may appear to be less engaged. So, going over the presentation outline, I broke it into 5 sections. So, in the first section, we will begin by recognizing the importance of looking inward at our own beliefs and our own perceptions of EAL families and how they actually may be hurting our school family relationships. As educators, we do recognize the importance of family engagement and the impact that it does have on student learning. We recognize the importance of positive family connections, and we work hard to build relationships with our students and our families. But as we know, this rapport and this relationship is more complicated with our EAL families. The goal of this presentation is to strengthen the connection between schools and staff and EAL families. In the end, you should feel more equipped and confident in engaging with your EAL families and feel ready to make positive change in your classroom and school. So, after we look inward at our assumptions, we will then move on to the barriers faced by EAL parents, as these barriers and challenges likely differ than those of other families. Third, we will talk about communication. Section 4 has us talking about rethinking our engagement practices and learning about 3 programs that have seen success in British Columbia. We will conclude the presentation with final thoughts and questions. Keep in mind that family engagement is a journey and not an event, and that perspective will help guide us through. So, section 1, looking inward. When teachers look inward at their beliefs and assumptions and create a space in school and in the classroom for parents to bring their valuable parent knowledge, parents feel welcomed in their children's schooling, more comfortable on the school landscape, and more empowered to engage in their children's education. As teachers, we do connect with our students and our families, and this is coming from a place of caring and love. However, we often allow our cultural biases and assumptions influence how we view our EAL families and their ability to contribute to their child's education. So, just thinking about your experiences in schools, with your colleagues, with your people that you work with in your building, have you ever thought or heard the following or something similar? EAL families seem to have a low educational interest for their children's learning. They rarely attend school events or come into the school. Why don't they care more about their kids' school life? EAL parents do not have the skills to help with homework, do not understand the notes that I send home, or volunteer in my classroom. They barely speak English themselves, so how can they help their children? Communicating with EAL parents is often difficult, so I avoid it unless absolutely necessary. How can I explain myself when we don't speak the same language? My EAL student needs a place. My EAL student needs a place to pray, cannot wear a bathing suit, wears a headscarf during sports, or doesn't eat or drink all day because they are fasting. How can I keep up with all these accommodations? While some of these statements may seem a bit exaggerated, I have heard alike comments in my schools. They're not meant to be hurtful, but rather stem from a lack of knowledge about cultural considerations or deficit thinking. In schools, deficit thinking involves blaming a student's family, or a student's culture for academic or behavioral difficulties, or in this case, a perceived lack of parent engagement. This hurts our families, and as we allow our views and biases to affect the way we think, it also affects the way we treat our families. So we do need to make sure that our assumptions do not affect the way that we work with our EAL students or families. Our biases may also be based on previous experiences with newcomer families. So if you've had, I would say, more negative experience, I guess, that may affect your future, or your future. I can't think of the word. Your future things that you do with families, or your future. Thank you. Thank you. So through my research, I read a lot of interviews. There were interviews between EAL families and schools and staff members. So staff members were interviewed, and these are Canadian teachers. And school staff members often described EAL families as uncaring, dysfunctional, unsupportive, and part of the problem. Essentially, they were obstacles in the way of progress and problems to be overcome by the school. Teachers were quick to assume that EAL parents had low interest for their children's learning based on their lack of volunteer commitments, attendance at school functions, or completed homework by their children. Now, I'm confident that most school staff in this room do not see newcomer parents as problems. However, it is likely that cultural assumptions and biases have led to misunderstandings or perhaps unintentional harmful opinions. The relationships that we have with EAL families are challenging. So looking inward and addressing these will allow us to address the needs of our EAL families and in turn increase parent engagement. So as this presentation does continue, I encourage you to remember Valentina's story, reflect on your own past experiences with EAL families, and remember the influence and the importance of perspective. We will now continue to section 2. So it is important that we are aware of the specific barriers faced by our EAL families. As we look to engage this specific group, once again, their perspective is key. We spend all day with our students, but we must remember that our time with them is actually just a small part of their lives. Outside of school, they belong to a family, a community, and a culture. The lives of our EAL students are complex, and they differ from the lives of our North American families in many ways. Identifying and understanding the challenges faced by our EAL families is the role of us, the school team, and teachers, and is an important step in supporting EAL family engagement. We will begin by looking at the brainstorm activity included in your presentation package. Please take a second to find this paper. So it looks like that. I think it's page 2. I do believe. So I do know we are short on time. So the activity with your table groups was to do a little bit of brainstorming on potential challenges or barriers that we believe our EAL families face when it comes to the following things. So if you want to jot down a couple ideas, is there anything that comes to mind with parent-teacher conferences? We'll just fast track it. Anything that would be a challenge for EAL families when it comes to time off work? Yeah, that's a good one. After school events such as literacy nights, open house, concerts. Anything that comes to mind? Time off work is another one that comes to mind for me. Okay. And then the third one actually does go into communication. So newsletters that we send home, permission slips, phone calls, emails. An obvious barrier for that would be probably language would be one that would come to mind. Anything that comes to mind? That's okay. We're going to go quick. And then homework would be the last one. So these are all things that we expect of our parents regularly. And there are things that are challenges or barriers that make these more difficult for our EAL families. So, in my research, there were many barriers that were presented, but I chose the top four that I came across that I felt were the most evident. So, the first barrier that I found was language. And I'm actually just going to back up to on your handout on the second last page. There are additional barriers listed as well. So, language, I would say, is one of the most common barriers expressed by teachers. But interestingly, it's not always the most common by EAL parents themselves. However, language is often a reason that EAL families are less engaged in school activities or classroom learning. Because of a language barrier, parents may feel unable to help their children with homework, and messages from school may often be misinterpreted or lost. Also, should a concern arise with their child, EAL parents may not feel confident in connecting the teacher through email or phone or know which questions to ask because those conversations can be difficult and they don't have the language to ask the questions that they need to ask, as we saw in the previous presentation. School staff also share similar views, and they are often hesitant to contact EAL parents as these conversations can be difficult. I know myself, I have often avoided phone calls with EAL families, just knowing that a language barrier does exist. Technology is helpful, however, communication is a challenge for both sides, and we will address that a little bit further on. The second barrier that stood out is the unfamiliarity of the Canadian school system. So many studies show that EAL parents often feel that the confusion of a new school system is an even greater barrier than language. Many newcomer parents have little formal school experience themselves, let alone understand the workings of a new country school system. Limited schooling is often a source of embarrassment, and EAL parents may feel intimidated attending their child's school. Unfamiliarity also leads to the confusion of roles. So, parents of ELLs may view their role as providing nurturing, teaching values, instilling good behavior, and maintaining first languages and culture. They can be reluctant to take on tasks that they see as the school's responsibility. On the other hand, as teachers, we expect that parents play an active role in education, such as helping with homework, at home reading, and special projects. EAL parents may also feel negativity or confusion towards being invited into our schools, as they may not understand the purpose or think that their child is in trouble. The confusion of a new school system often has EAL families avoiding it altogether. Um, it can be difficult to navigate through that. The third barrier that I came across was cultural differences. ELL parents often experience confusion and frustration with a school system that not only misunderstands their cultural values and beliefs, but places additional barriers that impede their full involvement in their children's schooling. The cultural and religious differences lived by our EAL families may create a barrier to engagement. Some EAL parents feel that schools don't accept their traditions, their languages, or their cultures. We, we are inclusive, we do accept those things, but our EAL parents may not view that. These families may be disconnected from the school community as it may not support the religious or cultural beliefs shared at home. Think about the school events that we host. Quite often, they're centered around North American holidays or celebrations, and often our EAL families do not attend or choose not attend because they do not celebrate those celebrations. We will look at the importance of celebrating cultural diversity and differences and inviting families into the school for many purposes. The fourth barrier is personal circumstances. Our EAL families often work labor intensive jobs, they attend language classes, both of which share challenging schedules. Parents themselves may have health concerns or have young children and elderly family members to care for. Newcomer parents often face isolation, being new to a community, and find it difficult to form friendships. The effects of trauma and poverty also play a role. So, the lives of our EAL families are clearly very complex as they are navigating many unique obstacles. So, as a school staff, how do we know which barriers our EAL families face? Well, we should just ask them. If we have conversations with our families, older siblings, conducting surveys in first languages, building those connections, partnering up with agencies such as Swiss, we may gain insight into their perspective and be able to provide support. As our EAL families feel supported and feel heard and listened to, they are likely more um, willing to engage in activities in the school. So, like I said, your handout does have a list of other potential barriers, but building understanding and positive relationships will improve family engagement. So, now we will talk about communication. What time is it? Doing good. Newcomers' parents' lack of engagement with the school community is further exacerbated by the mediums of communication through school notices or web postings, which can be less effective for those who speak English as a second language. So, language and communication are very much so intertwined. Meaningful and ongoing communication between school and home is important, but this may prove to be extra challenging with our EAL families. As language is often named a major barrier to EAL engagement, it is important we specifically look at our communication practices. Parents have questions and they do want to know about their kids' school lives, but may not always understand what is being communicated from school or know which questions to ask. In this section, we will discuss current practices regarding communication and look at ways to improve. So, just off the top of your head, think of how do you communicate or share information with your school families? So, off the top of my head, Edsby is probably one that comes to mind the most. Um, Phone calls, emails, WhatsApp, that's a good one. Newsletters, that's a good one. Um, Yeah, a lot of it is digital, right? There's emails, phone calls, or not phone calls, emails, Edsby. That communication is important, right? So those things that we're doing is important. It keeps our families informed. However, this seemingly two-way communication can be difficult with our EAL families. So if we consider the perspective of our EAL families, this type of communication that we use may not always be favorable. So, as much as we try to be accommodating to everyone with many forms of communication, I know we send papers home and we put things on Edsby and we try different ways to get information out. Our one size fits all school home communication model often disadvantages EAL students and their families. So, in traditional models of communication, exchanges are described by a one way flow of messages. So, from sender to receiver, or messages, or messages are assumed to be interactive, but are comparable to a ping pong game. So, messages are exchanged back and forth, but they're not simultaneously shared. So, discrepancies between parents and teachers' views are most probably the result of the fact that schools rely mainly on linear forms of communication between school and home rather than a transactional communication model. So, what is transactional communication? So, transactional communication goes beyond a simple exchange of messages and understands that communication is an ongoing and complex process. This communication model benefits our EAL families as it favors empathy and understanding between both sides. Emphasis is placed on collaboration, understanding, and relationships. This model allows schools to recognize that cultural background and experiences shape how people express themselves. So, for example, teachers may recognize a family's difficulty in arranging transportation for school conferences or meetings and suggest appropriate strategies to help with this. Teachers are aware of the challenges faced by EAL families and show a willingness to help. This model implies, like I said, mutual understanding, And teachers and families are aware of each other's views in relation to school and expectations. So, knowledge and information is a prerequisite for successful parent engagement. And this plays a crucial role in transactional communication. So, knowledge is power, communicate or connection is important, and also communicating your expectations. EAL parents do want to help, they want to support, they want to engage, they just don't know how, right? So, we need to be very clear in our expectations with EAL families. So continue to use translators, use bilingual signage, newsletters, all those things. Another suggestion is ask your families, what is your preferred method of communication, and offer as many options as possible. All these forms that we use are great. We just need to be mindful of how we are using them and remember the importance of understanding and the perspective of our EAL families. Your handout also provides some other practical suggestions for best communication practices. Yeah, it's coming. Yay! Yes. Perfect. Yes, they are. Yeah, so section 4. Oh, there we go. There we go. What time do I have to? Being really mindful of my time. 3:10. Okay, I can do it. All right, so section 4 is called rethinking engagement. So now that we have looked inward, we have talked to our EAL families about their barriers and their challenges, we're looking at communication and how that affects how our families are understanding our messages. Now we can look at ways to support and empower our EAL families and create safe, welcoming spaces in our schools. So we will now watch a video posted by Education Weekly. You will see a school division in the United States that has implemented specific strategies to engage families of ELL students. As you watch, please make note of the ways they engage and support their families. And I hope it works. Do I have to click it?
So missing, incomplete.
Every family brings strengths to the table. Every family wants their child to succeed. Families are a key part of the system, and if we aren't thinking about that student and his or her family, then we aren't really thinking about that student. Our department supports 3 major programs: Parent University, Academic Parent-Teacher Teams, and the Parent-Teacher Home Visit Project. Parent University's mission is to build the capacity of families to support their child's learning outside of the classroom. And we have roughly 300 classes per year, pre-K through high school, so we touch on a lot of critical points.
The hope of tonight's program is parents. You will see some teaching modeled, and we're going to give you some activities and resources.
We focus on things like study skills, teaching parents to log in and look at their child's grades and attendance, the transition to high school. The system gets really complicated, and we try to break it down for parents. It really is partnership, and both sides of that partnership need support. So helping educators to partner with families is also a piece of the puzzle.
Prior to teaching here, I had a lot of different assumptions about students. And it just felt like there was a piece missing from the teaching in this environment, and that maybe that would be the piece I needed to do my job better.
In School Watch tonight, 2 years ago, the Washoe County School District started visiting their students' families in their homes. Well, Dilworth Middle School began the program this year, and they're already getting a lot of positive reaction.
I started going on these home visits, and I was realizing the connection that you build with the students and the family is huge. It's beyond measurable. You're not there to really talk about what's happening at school and what kind of student they are. You're getting to know the family, and you're understanding how important education is for them and what they want for their kids.
Creo que es de mucha ayuda para los padres y para los estudiantes y maestros también, porque así los maestros, ellos saben cómo viven las familias de los estudiantes y también pueden saber las necesidades, pueden ayudar de muchas formas los maestros.
It builds instant compassion into you, not to cut students slack because of that, but to figure out different ways to help them, to talk to them about, I understand this, but this is still important, so we're going to work around this. So it just builds a bridge that both of you can walk on together.
We still have more families to reach. There's always room for improvement. We've never got it all figured out. Until we close achievement gaps and every child is graduating and every child has the choice to go to college or the choice to go into a career that they find interesting, we'll be here still working on it.
Almost forgot about the microphone. These initiatives serve the diverse needs of the school and aim to support the families. I just wanted to touch specifically on the parent-teacher home visits program. I was fortunate enough to participate in the parent-teacher home visits initiative. It was a program piloted throughout Saskatchewan, and it was a very positive experience. I'm trying to think of how many school divisions participated over the province. It was kind of funny at the time. I didn't realize how big the program actually was and didn't realize how many schools were participating. And there was a big study at the end, and it was quite important. And then at the time, I actually had no idea. I was just like, cool, I get to go hang out and talk to families. And looking back, I'm very thankful that I got to participate in the program. My visiting partner and I, we connected with 7 of our school families. And like the video there, the parent-teacher home visits program, it wasn't a conference. It wasn't talking about school, really. It was more about conversations. So we shared stories. Parents talked about their hopes and their dreams for their children, talked about their backgrounds, where they come from, traditions, joys. It was just a really cool experience. It was really positive to connect with those families on a personal level outside of school. We did notice there were 21 families in our school that participated. We did notice that participating students, their attendance actually did increase, and they were more consistent at coming to school. Parents were in the building more often, and we did notice an increase in communication. It was a very positive program. The program is just one way that we can connect with school families and promote EAL family engagement. Something's beeping up here. I'm just gonna. I think it's good. It's okay. I stopped it. It's fine. Yeah, but I lost my clock. That's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna go. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we must look past our traditional ways of parent involvement and shift our minds to parent engagement. So we also, though, need to keep in mind the specific needs of our EAL families. So how can we shift our perspective and engage our EAL families in a new way? So, a traditional school centric view is where schools concern themselves with how parents can assist them in serving their agenda, which might include fundraisers, working school ran events, etc. So, a family centric school space is ideal as families are at the center of pedagogy and learning. Family centric invites us to walk alongside families and create spaces where parent knowledge is valued in the classroom. So 3 programs that I came across in my research were recently implemented for EAL families specifically and have seen success. Rather than viewing family and cultural differences as barriers, the schools involved celebrate culture, languages, and create opportunities for learning with families. So the first program is Parent University. University was briefly shared in the video we just watched. Parents are invited into the school to learn about their children's school experiences. They may also gain knowledge about useful apps or websites, such as online conference booking sites or at-home literacy supports. Parents feel welcomed into the building, access information, and become engaged participants in their children's learning. It would be important to arrange for translators to accommodate the language needs of some families. Parent University allows teachers to build relationships with families and ensure important information is being understood. This program addresses the barrier of unfamiliarity in the Canadian school system and increases parent knowledge. We did something similar like this at a school that I taught at. It wasn't, we did two. We did one year, it was just for EAL families. It was very specifically geared towards EAL families. And then we ran another event the next year that was for everybody. So both events looked a little bit different, but in the end, I feel they were both very successful in engaging families. The next program is conversation circles. So conversation circles involve welcoming EAL parents into the school to participate in conversations with one another in English. So a safe and comfortable space is provided, and the need for childcare is lifted as the group meets during school hours. English language skills are improved, and self-confidence is built by practicing the language. EAL parents also gain practical information and make connections with other families who share similar situations and challenges. These circles create a unique community where parents act as group leaders and view themselves as equal partners with the facilitator and other parents. Conversation circles create a sense of pride, belonging, and connection with our EAL families, where school is a positive experience. I also worked at a school where conversation circles took place. I think it was called Moms Group because it ended up being moms, but it was lovely. They would meet in a room and chat and visit and tell stories and shared baking. And we weren't really involved. We facilitated the process, but it was a nice space for them to go and feel welcome. And the kids really liked seeing their moms at school. The last program I came across was the Parent Mentor Program. So the Parent Mentor Program gives families a reciprocal place in classrooms. Volunteer parents are trained in sessions led by different staff members or community partners. In the model described by the authors, each parent is assigned to work with one teacher in a grade of their preference for about 2 hours a day, 4 days a week. The 5th day is used for debriefing, further training, and parent goal setting. While working in classrooms, parents gain knowledge about the Canadian school system as they're in schools. They develop skills to support their child and strengthen their own language skills. In return, they offer their cultural and parental knowledge, and this can be used to promote inclusive teaching practices. The Parent Mentor Program forms interconnections between student and family learning. EAL students in these classrooms may also feel more at ease as they are seeing an adult who looks like them in a leadership role. These 3 programs all share a common theme. They allow for EAL parent empowerment and an increased presence in schools and classrooms. Parents feel valued and they feel like they have a place in our schools. A meaningful purpose allows these parents to gain useful knowledge, and this may alleviate stress that is often felt about school. Sharing personal experiences and culture allows us to celebrate diversity and has a positive impact on student learning and relationships. There are many other creative ways to promote engagement with our EAL families. You can find a list of suggestions on your handout. When considering your school's future engagement activities, keep in mind that valuing parent knowledge and creating safe, welcoming spaces is key. At the bottom there, it says each and every classroom in school has a wealth of untapped resources available to it through the children's parents. Our EAL parents may not have the best language skills, but they know things and they have a culture and they have an identity that can be very helpful to us in the classroom, not just for our EAL students. Conclusion. So given the increased diversity within classrooms It's essential that schools find creative ways to work with all families. The nice thing about many of these strategies and tips is that they're not only for our EAL families, they can be implemented with all of our families. Everyone benefits from this. So, as the presentation concludes, I would like you to reflect on the following. So, do you believe? All parents have dreams for their children and want what's best for them. All parents have the capacity to support their children's learning. Parent and school staff should be equal partners. The responsibility for building partnerships between school and home rests primarily with school staff and leaders. I would like you to return to the word perspective and hope that you're feeling ready to look inward and examine your own perceptions and biases. As we identify barriers, recognize the value of meaningful communication, and empower our EAL parents, we do our part to strengthen this important relationship. Our students come from diverse backgrounds and cultures. Their parents also have knowledge and skills that allow us to broaden our traditional views of family engagement. We can share cultures, traditions, and create strong collaborative partnerships with our EAL families. I will acknowledge that many of these programs require people, funding, and time, all of which are in demand in public education. But moving forward, you can decide that EAL parent engagement is a priority in your school. I would suggest by starting with assembling a team, identify the barriers faced by your EAL families, and take the time to create meaningful engagement opportunities specific to those needs. When possible, involve community organizations so they can be an asset in this process. As I said at the beginning, engagement isn't an event, it's a journey, and it's ongoing. I hope that you feel ready to share the perspective of your EAL families and are ready for change in your school. Together, we can build partnerships that best serve students, families, schools, and communities. Thank you.